Before we begin, if you're listening to this alone at night, you're exactly where you should be. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more true horror stories, disturbing encounters, and unexplained events uploaded every day. Now lock your doors, turn off the lights, and let's get into tonight's stories. Every truck driver learns about black ice sooner or later. You don't see it. You don't hear it. By the time you realize it's there, you're already sliding. Most crashes happen because someone loses control. Mine happened because someone else wanted me to. To this day, I don't know who was driving that pickup, or how they kept finding me on roads that had already been closed for hours. My name is Caleb. In January of 2022, I worked for a regional delivery company based in western Colorado. Most of my routes took me through mountain towns where snowstorms were just part of the job. I'd been driving commercial vehicles for almost 8 years. I'd handled ice, heavy snow, whiteouts. Nothing really surprised me anymore. That's probably why I ignored the weather warnings that Friday afternoon. The dispatcher called around noon. "We've got one last emergency delivery to Ridge Pass." I looked outside the warehouse window. Snow had already started falling. "The storm's moving in." "I know," he replied, "but the customer needs it tonight." It was medical equipment for a small clinic. I didn't argue. I loaded the cargo into a company cargo van and left just after 1 o'clock. For the first hour, everything was normal. The roads were wet but clear. Traffic moved steadily. The mountains ahead disappeared behind thick gray clouds, but that wasn't unusual. By 3 o'clock, the snow intensified. Large flakes covered the windshield faster than the wipers could clear them. Visibility dropped to a few hundred feet. The state highway department activated flashing signs. Winter storm warning. Expect road closures. I still had 40 miles to go. Turning around would have meant abandoning the delivery. So I kept driving. The farther I climbed into the mountains, the fewer vehicles remained. Soon, there were only 3 of us on the highway. A snowplow in front, my van, and an old black pickup about a quarter mile behind me. I noticed it mostly because it never changed its distance. Whether I sped up or slowed down, it stayed exactly where it was. About 20 minutes later, the snowplow exited onto another route. Now it was just me and the pickup. The wind slammed against the van hard enough to push it sideways. Snow drifted across both lanes. The center line disappeared. I slowed to 30 miles an hour. The pickup behind me did the same. Then my radio crackled. "All traffic. Ridge Pass closing." Static swallowed the rest. I tried switching stations. Nothing. Just bursts of interference. The GPS froze a minute later. The map vanished, replaced by a spinning loading icon. I sighed. Perfect. Another mile passed before I hit the first patch of black ice. The steering wheel suddenly felt weightless. The rear tires drifted sideways. I instinctively eased off the accelerator instead of braking. The van slid across half the highway before the tires found pavement again. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. That could have ended very differently. When I looked into the mirror, the pickup had also stopped. Not because it had lost control, because it was waiting. It stayed motionless until I started driving again. Then it pulled onto the road and resumed following me. Same distance, same speed. Never closer, never farther away. By then, darkness had settled over the mountains. Snow reflected my headlights like thousands of tiny mirrors. Everything outside looked white and black. No color, no landmarks, just endless forest. Then I saw brake lights. A state trooper SUV blocked the highway. The officer waved me to stop. I rolled down my window. "Road's closed," he shouted over the wind. "Blizzard's getting worse. I've got medical equipment for Ridge Pass Clinic." He glanced at the paperwork, then sighed. "They're expecting you." He pointed toward the highway. "Go straight there. Don't stop for anything." I nodded, then looked behind me. The black pickup sat almost 200 yards back. Its headlights glowed through the blowing snow. The trooper frowned. "You traveling together?" "No." He turned to look again. "There isn't another vehicle back there." I stared past him. The pickup was gone. Completely. I almost asked him about it. Instead, I assumed the storm had hidden it. The trooper moved his SUV aside, just enough for me to continue. As I pulled away, I checked my mirrors every few seconds. Nothing. No headlights. No truck. 20 minutes later, I reached the narrowest part of Ridge Pass. Steep cliffs rose on one side. A sheer drop disappeared into darkness on the other. Guardrails were barely visible beneath packed snow. The wind howled across the road. Then, my headlights illuminated fresh tire tracks. Only one vehicle had driven this stretch recently. The tracks looked less than a minute old. Someone was ahead of me. I followed them carefully. The tracks rounded a bend. Then, stopped. Not faded. Stopped. As though the vehicle had simply disappeared. No skid marks. No turnaround. Nothing. Just empty snow. I parked the van and stepped outside with my flashlight. The wind nearly knocked me over. I followed the tracks to the exact point where they ended. There was no cliff. No side road. No pull-off. Just untouched snow beyond them. A horn blasted behind me. I spun around. The black pickup sat 50 yards away. Its headlights were off. I hadn't heard it approach. The driver's door slowly opened. A man climbed out. Tall. Heavy winter coat. Face hidden beneath a hood. He raised one arm. Not waving. Pointing. Toward the woods. Then he got back inside the truck. The engine revved. The pickup drove straight into the trees. Not around them. Into them. Branches never moved. Snow never fell. It simply vanished between the pines. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. I jumped back into the van and locked the doors. The clinic was only 8 miles away. I wasn't stopping again. The storm reached full strength. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. More than once, I wondered if I'd driven off the road without realizing it. Finally, faint lights appeared ahead. The clinic. Relief washed over me. I pulled into the parking lot just after 8. A nurse hurried outside to meet me. While unloading the equipment, I casually mentioned the pickup following me. Her expression changed. What color? Black. She looked toward the highway. You weren't supposed to see that. I laughed nervously. What do you mean? She explained that several drivers over the years had reported an old black pickup appearing during major storms along Ridge Pass. Always following. Never passing. Sometimes helping stranded motorists. Sometimes simply watching them. No one had ever identified the driver. The next morning, after the storm cleared, I stopped at the highway patrol office before heading home. I told the trooper everything. He listened quietly. When I finished, he walked to a filing cabinet and returned with an old photograph. It showed a crumpled black pickup resting against a pine tree, half buried in snow. When was this taken? I asked. 1998. What happened? The driver was trying to warn people about black ice after a rock slide blocked the pass. He died. The trooper nodded. He froze before rescuers found him. I stared at the photo. The truck had one broken headlight, the same one I'd seen the night before. I drove home without saying much. Months passed. Life returned to normal. Then another winter arrived. I was working a different route when another storm rolled in. As I slowed for a patch of ice, I checked my rearview mirror out of habit. Far behind me, keeping the exact same distance, was an old black pickup. One headlight burned brighter than the other. It never got closer. It never fell behind. And when I reached the first town, it was gone. Maybe the driver was trying to warn me. Maybe he was making sure I reached safety. Or maybe there are some roads where the last person to die in a storm never really leaves. If you've ever been caught in a blizzard, you've probably heard the same advice. Stay inside. Find shelter. Wait for help. What nobody tells you is that not every shelter is empty. Some people spend storms hiding from the weather. Others are waiting for someone else to hide there with them. I learned the difference one January night in North Dakota. It was the last time I ever trusted a locked door in the middle of nowhere. My name is Travis. This happened in January of 2020. I was 35 years old and worked for a propane company that serviced farms across eastern North Dakota. Winter was our busiest season. People depended on us when temperatures dropped below zero. That afternoon, I had one final delivery before heading home. The forecast mentioned increasing winds overnight. Nothing unusual. By 4 o'clock, I'd finished filling a customer's propane tank nearly 50 miles from the nearest town. Snow had already started falling. I climbed into my service truck and started toward Highway 52. The first 30 minutes were uneventful. Then the wind changed. Within minutes, snow drifted across the road so heavily that the pavement disappeared beneath fresh powder. The truck's headlights reflected off the blowing snow and until it felt like I was driving through a tunnel made of white dust. I slowed to 25 miles an hour. There wasn't another vehicle in sight. About 10 miles later, my phone buzzed. A weather alert covered the screen. Blizzard warning. Travel impossible. Seek shelter immediately. Almost at the same moment, my dispatcher called. You still on County Road 6? Yeah. State police are closing the highways. I'm almost to the junction. No, you're not. I frowned. What do you mean? The junction's already closed. The call broke apart in static before disconnecting completely. No signal. I kept driving until the road disappeared beneath a 6-foot snowdrift. There was no getting through it. I backed up and turned around, looking for somewhere, anywhere, to wait out the storm. That's when I noticed a faded green highway sign, almost completely buried in snow. Emergency storm shelter, 1 mile. I had never seen that sign before. I figured it was an old county shelter for stranded drivers. It beat sitting in the truck all night. I followed the narrow side road through the drifting snow. Eventually, headlights illuminated a squat concrete building with a steel door. A faded county emblem was painted beside it. The parking area was empty. No other vehicles. The door wasn't locked. Inside, the shelter was surprisingly warm. There was a wood stove in one corner, a table, several folding chairs, emergency blankets stacked on metal shelves. A generator hummed quietly somewhere behind the walls. It looked like exactly the kind of place counties built decades ago for emergencies. I almost laughed with relief. Someone had even left a kettle sitting on the stove. The water inside was warm. Not hot. Warm. As though someone had been there recently. I called out, "Hello." Silence. I checked every room. A storage closet. A tiny restroom. An equipment room. Nobody. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I locked the door from the inside. Started a fresh fire in the stove. Ate one of the protein bars from my truck. Then settled into a folding chair to wait for daylight. Outside, the wind screamed against the building. The metal roof groaned every few seconds. The shelter felt solid, safe, until I heard footsteps. Not outside. Above me. Slow. Measured. One end of the roof. To the other. Then back again. I stared at the ceiling. The footsteps stopped directly overhead. I grabbed my flashlight. There wasn't any attic access inside the shelter. No ladder. Nothing. Eventually the sounds faded. I convinced myself it was snow sliding across the roof. It had to be. Around 10 that night, someone knocked. 3 slow knocks. I looked through the small reinforced window in the door. A young woman stood outside wearing a heavy winter coat. Snow covered her shoulders. She looked exhausted. She raised one hand weakly. "Please." Her voice barely carried through the wind. "Please let me in." I reached for the lock. Then I hesitated. Something didn't make sense. There were no footprints behind her. The parking lot was covered in untouched snow. She should have left a trail. Instead, it looked as though she'd simply appeared at the door. I spoke through the glass. "Where's your car?" She didn't answer. "Did you walk here?" Again, nothing. She only repeated, "Please let me in." Her expression never changed. Not once. She didn't shiver. She didn't wipe snow from her face. She simply stared through the window, waiting. Every instinct told me to unlock the door. She looked freezing, but another part of me couldn't stop staring at the snow. No footprints. Not even one. I stepped backward instead. "I'm calling for help." Her face slowly changed. Not angry. Disappointed. She lowered her head, turned away, and disappeared into the whiteout within seconds. I couldn't sleep after that. Every hour I checked the window. Nothing. Just blowing snow. Around 2 in the morning, the footsteps returned. Again they crossed the roof. Then, they stopped. A loud scraping sound echoed through the building. Metal against metal. It sounded like someone dragging something across the roof. Then another noise. The door handle slowly turned. Once. Twice. 3 times. Whoever was outside wasn't knocking anymore. They were trying the lock. I held my flashlight toward the entrance without making a sound. The handle stopped moving. For nearly a minute, everything was silent. Then a man's voice spoke through the door. "You don't have to be scared." I said nothing. "I know you're in there." Still, I stayed quiet. "We've been watching this shelter all evening." My stomach tightened. "We, not I," the voice continued. "We just need somewhere warm." A second voice interrupted him. Lower. Closer. "Open it." Then silence. 5 minutes passed. 10. Eventually I heard footsteps crunching away from the building. Not one person. Several. I didn't move until sunrise. When daylight finally broke through the storm, I cautiously unlocked the door. The parking lot told me everything I needed to know. There were footprints now. At least 4 different sets. They surrounded the building, circled every window, stopped outside the emergency exit. One set remained directly beneath the small window where the young woman had stood. The prints were deep enough to suggest someone had been standing there for a very long time. But they began, and ended, at the wall. No tracks led toward the road. None led away. About an hour later, a county snowplow reached the shelter. The driver looked surprised to find me alive. He helped dig my truck out before asking how the night had gone. I mentioned the visitors. His expression changed immediately. What visitors? I described the woman, then the voices, then the footprints. He looked at the shelter for a long moment. Finally he sighed. This place wasn't built for travelers. What? It was built after a series of robberies back in the 80s. He explained that criminals had once waited for stranded motorists during blizzards, pretending to offer help before robbing them. The county built emergency shelters specifically so people wouldn't accept rides from strangers. Did they ever catch them? Most of them. Most? He nodded. One group disappeared during a storm. I didn't think much of it until a week later. A sheriff's deputy called me. They'd reviewed the shelter's security cameras after I filed my report. There was a problem, he said. What kind of problem? The cameras never recorded the woman. My pulse quickened. What about the men? We heard voices. You heard them? Yes. But nobody appeared on the video. The audio captured every word, every knock, every attempt to turn the handle. The video showed only an empty snow-covered parking lot. I asked for a copy of the recording. The deputy refused. He said it had already been archived with several similar reports from previous winters. I never pushed the issue. I didn't want to know how many. I didn't want to hear those voices again. Now, whenever a blizzard rolls in and people say they're looking for shelter, I hope they find one. But I also hope they never hear someone politely asking to be let inside. Because sometimes, the storm isn't what trapped them outside. Most people think snowplow drivers spend the night clearing empty roads. That's only half true. The roads are empty, but your radio never is. Calls come in all night. Stranded drivers. Jackknifed trucks. Power lines down. Accidents you can't even see until you're almost on top of them. During my 8th winter working for the county, I answered a call that never should have existed. Because according to dispatch, the road I was sent to hadn't been open in almost 15 years. My name is Owen. I worked for the county highway department in northern Minnesota. By the winter of 2021, I'd been driving snowplows for nearly 8 years. The overnight shift wasn't glamorous, but I enjoyed it. There was something satisfying about turning an impassable highway into a safe road before sunrise. You learned to respect winter. You never rushed. You never assumed the road ahead was clear. And above all, you never ignored fresh tire tracks during a blizzard. Because if someone was out there, they probably needed help. That January started colder than usual. For nearly a week, temperatures never climbed above 0. Then the storm arrived. The forecast predicted more than 18 inches of snow with wind gusts over 50 miles an hour. Every plow in the county was assigned a route. Mine covered almost 70 miles of back roads connecting farms and small communities. Dispatch warned us before we left. Visibility is near 0 in places. Report anything unusual immediately. At the time, I thought they meant stranded vehicles. I didn't realize how literal they were being. Around 11 that night, I began my first pass along County Road 18. Fresh snow erased everything behind me almost as quickly as I cleared it. The windshield wipers never stopped moving. The heater struggled to keep the inside of the cab warm. Visibility rarely exceeded 50 feet. It was just me, the engine, and the constant scrape of the plow blade against the pavement. An hour into the shift, dispatch called. Owen, you got a vehicle reported near mile marker 42. I haven't seen anybody. Caller says an SUV slid into the ditch. I'm 5 minutes away. I continued north. Nothing. No headlights. No taillights. No vehicle. Only untouched snow. I drove another mile. Still nothing. I radioed back. I'm at 42. Road's empty. There was a pause. Then dispatch replied, "That's strange." They attempted to call the reporting party again. No answer. Eventually they assumed someone else had already helped the driver. I continued my route. About 30 minutes later, I noticed tire tracks. Fresh ones. They crossed directly over the lane I'd cleared less than 10 minutes earlier. That wasn't possible. No vehicle had passed me. Snowplows block almost the entire roadway. Nobody could have driven around me without leaving obvious marks. Yet there they were. 2 clean tracks stretching ahead into the blizzard. I followed them. The tracks continued for nearly 3 miles. Then, they disappeared. Not gradually, not beneath drifting snow. They simply stopped in the middle of the road. I climbed out with my flashlight. The snow was untouched beyond that point. No turnaround, no driveway, no side road, nothing. Just an empty highway disappearing into blowing snow. I returned to the cab feeling uneasy. Before I could close the door, the radio crackled. "Owen, go ahead. Did you locate the SUV?" "What SUV?" "The one you just reported." I frowned. I never reported an SUV. Dispatch fell silent. "We received a transmission from your truck about 30 seconds ago." "It wasn't me." The dispatcher hesitated. "The voice sounded like yours." I checked the radio. Everything appeared normal. I chalked it up to interference. Winter storms played havoc with communications. Still, the back of my neck wouldn't stop tingling. Around 2 in the morning, I reached an old section of highway closed years earlier after a bridge collapsed. Concrete barriers blocked the entrance. My route didn't include that road anymore. As I passed it, I saw headlights, moving. Beyond the barriers, someone was driving the abandoned highway. I slowed the plow. The headlights stopped, then flashed twice, as if signaling me. I grabbed the radio. "Dispatch, I've got a vehicle on Old River Road." Silence. Then static. Finally, "Owen." The voice sounded distorted, almost metallic. "Don't follow it." I sat upright. "Dispatch?" No response. Only static. Then the normal dispatcher came back. "Owen, repeat your last transmission." I asked if she'd just warned me. She sounded confused. "I haven't spoken in 5 minutes." Logic told me to keep driving. Curiosity won. I parked the plow beside the barriers and walked a few yards onto the abandoned road. The headlights remained perfectly still. About half a mile away, the wind howled through the trees. I called out. No answer. The lights slowly disappeared around a bend. Something crunched behind me. I turned. Fresh footprints, leading toward my snowplow. Not away from it. Toward it. One step after another. Whoever made them had approached while I was looking at the lights. I swept my flashlight across the road. Nothing. No person. No movement. Only snow blowing sideways. I hurried back to the cab. The driver's door stood open. I was certain I'd closed it. The engine was still running. The heater still blowing. But someone had written 3 words in the fog covering the inside of the windshield. "Turn back now." I stared at the message. It slowly began to fade as the defroster cleared the glass. I finished my route before dawn without another stop. Just after 6, I returned to the county garage. Another driver noticed I looked pale. I told him everything. The headlights, the footprints, the message. He didn't laugh. Instead, he asked a single question. "What road?" When I told him, he quietly walked away. Later that morning, my supervisor called me into his office. He closed the door, then pulled out an old newspaper clipping. 15 years earlier, during another blizzard, one of the county's snowplow operators had ignored a road closure to help what he believed was a stranded vehicle on Old River Road. Neither he nor the plow was found. Around midnight, dispatch radioed me. "Owen, we've got another report of fresh tire tracks on County Road 18. I sighed. "I'm heading there." When I reached the location, there were no tire tracks, only the wide path my plow had cleared. As I turned around, another transmission came through. This time it wasn't dispatch. It was a man's voice. Calm. Older. "You missed the bridge." I slammed on the brakes. The road ahead looked normal. I climbed out with a flashlight. 15 feet in front of the plow, the pavement ended. A section of road had collapsed into a washout hidden beneath fresh snow. Another few seconds, and I would have driven straight into it. Dispatch reached me moments later. They hadn't sent any warning. Nobody else was on the radio. I still work winter maintenance. Every season, new drivers ask why I always stop when the radio crackles with static. I tell them it's just a habit. The truth is different. Sometimes, during the worst blizzards, I hear the same calm voice one more time. Never long conversations. Never explanations. Just enough to keep me from making one fatal mistake. I don't know who or what is speaking. Maybe it's only exhaustion. Maybe it's my imagination. Or maybe the last snowplow driver on Old River Road is still finishing the route he never made it home from.